anchor the tool, shove it, and scrape. And now, if you would, Jeff, contrast that with your, what do they call it, a pyramid?
The
triangle.
Diamond
Diamond tool.
tool. The diamond tool. So now we've got the diamond tool.
Okay. And let's, if we were contrasting that with a conventional tool, it would just simply be what we might call a spear point scraper out of high-speed steel.
Yep.
But again, as we've talked about, the disadvantage of the conventional is you got to have a grinder and you got to be able to sharpen it, although that is one of the easiest tools to sharpen.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll get similar results out of both of them because you're going to use them in a scraping mode.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe show us how you do a few details with the...
Okay. So,
diamond.
one of the most basic ones, if you want it to burn a ring on it, you can just come along and do your standard, push it in and cut your little groove.
The standard ass cut.
Yeah, exactly. You can do some of the back cutting, like if you were doing rounding a bead over, you want to round it a little bit more. You can use the side of the cutter, because that is one advantage of this.
So it looks like you could do quite a bit of detail.
All four sides are sharp, so you can use this whole edge right here.
And I guess now when we talk about sharpening, you want to briefly mention about how you change and rotate and keep a fresh edge?
Yeah, so when you get the carbide cutters, it depends upon where they are, but there's typically, you have to zoom in really close here, there's a dot. And this particular cutter is from Arizona Carbides, and he puts a dot on one spot on your carbide. So when this side starts to get dull, I'll loosen it, turn it 90 degrees. I always try to go clockwise, with my tool, with them. So this, I started here on the left in the bottom, so that side got worn out because that would have been on the top. Turned it clockwise 90 degrees and just keep following the dot, and when my dot ends back up over here, yes.
Maybe you want to talk about the special, what, has it got a torque screw on it or something?
It's just a hex. You can use just your standard Allen wrench. With this particular one, the Easy Wood tools come with their own. It's a very small, I'm not even sure the size of it. But, you know, I'll loosen it when it gets dull. And then literally just push it up, turn it, drop it back down, and now I see that the dot's in the third position. And then I can follow that around. And when my dot comes back over here, I know I've used all four sides, and it's time for a new cutter or to sharpen and refresh this cutter.
And Mark Palma showed how you could take a paper clip to get all the dust out of there, because sometimes it's gonna pack in there.
Yeah, these Easy Wood tools have a very small, tiny screw. You can see that one that we use when we're using the round one. It's already packed full.
Tilt it just a little bit. Yeah.
It's already packed full.
Okay.
And sometimes you can blow it out, and you can see it's still held a lot in there. Yeah. I tend to just use my blower, and I'll just hold the blower, for my air compressor, the blower nozzle. Just hold it up really close and blow it out, and that usually gets out the dust.
But if you got a low tech shop like me, where I don't keep a air compressor handy, that paper clip probably works.
Yes, paper clips. I also use a nail. Okay, so now when we get into making the recesses and tendons for mounting your bowls, when we want to start getting into your recess and tendons to mount your bowls, traditionally a lot of people would use a skew. And you can come in along here, you can kind of come in several different ways of doing it, and you work it to where you get that nice sharp corner. And you get that skew in there and do that. You can also do that with Easy Wood tools. You could use a square scraper. Once again, you can plunge it in, or you can come in from the side, because remember it's sharp on all four corners. So you can come in and work your way down. Since this is the radius square scraper, I can't get that really nice sharp corner that you want to get. So then you can switch over to your point tool. And with the point tool, once again, both sides are sharp. Both sides are sharp. You can kind of come in, you can gently go along, and you can work it to where you get into that corner, and you can get a fairly nice, crisp, clean corner in there. You're still going to have a very slight radius with it, but not enough to make a huge difference, and you should still get a good hold.
Now, if I was doing it traditionally, I would rough the tenon with the bowl gouge, but then for the detail, I'd pick up that detail spindle gouge that gives me control to get in real tight in a corner, and it's real strong because the flute, it's a very, very shallow fluted spindle gouge. So that's the tool I would use rather than, in my case, I would not use the skew. And how about for a recess?
Okay, so with the traditional tools, you could use a skew. But once again, your tailstock has to be out of the way. So if this is not mounted, you couldn't do it.
Clearly, with a skew, you've got to have it mounted and get it out of the way. But you can use a skew for that recess.
Right. Or, Mike, I remember the video you had a while back where you used this dovetail grind. With that one, you could actually work it in here.
I'll have that if you click on the eye icon, you can link to that video on making that. That's from an old Harbor Freight tool.
And so there, you can get in and actually make that. With that grind there, you kind of come in, plunge it, work your way in, and work yourself down to get that dovetail recess with your tailstock in place.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
The easy tools, it's going to be similar to the gouge. Your tailstock has to be out of the way, but you're going to come in, you can go with your square tool, come in, make your recess, and after you get your recess fairly cleared out, when you want to get that back cut for your dovetail, once again, you can switch to the point tool.
So that's where I would say one of the disadvantages of the carbide is the versatility. As you described it, you have to have a chucking mechanism of a woodworm screw, or you've got to have that bowl blank mounted and the tailstock out of the way to be able to use those tools for a recess. But then you may choose not to use a recess, which I rarely use a recess, so that may or may not be a significant issue, but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, especially if you're doing a green bowl that you dried and you want to put it back on here, and you've got to have a jam chuck. So now how are you going to get in and clean up your recess on that jam chuck with a jam chuck in the way?
Yeah.
So that is one thing to consider.
Okay, so I guess to me one of the biggest knocks about carbide for me personally is I don't just turn bowls and platters. I turn lots of different stuff, and they're not quite as versatile. When you start getting smaller work and you start doing finer detail, you're going to be limited on a cove. The cove is not going to be, it can't be any smaller than that tip. Whereas if you're using traditional tools, and you're using, for example, this detail tool, you can make a much smaller cove. And you can see that becoming an issue when you start turning a wide variety of things, such as finials on Christmas tree ornaments, getting that type of detail, getting in here and doing this kind of detail on a box is going to be problematic with the carbide tools. Another example of a pretty common cut, especially if you're making spindles, is a lot of times you're going to mark the features, and I would tend to use a parting tool, and probably a thin parting tool, and you can go fairly deep. I think if you're relying on the carbide tools, the challenge is you use the square cutter, but you're going to remove more wood, and it might be a feature next to it where that wouldn't be a good idea. Or you could use the diamond tool, but you can only go so deep because of the shape, and sometimes you want to use that parting tool to actually part off the object, or go very, very deep to set the depth of that feature that the carbide is going to suffer from. So they each have their place, their pros and cons. One of the things that I have noticed, some of the general woodworkers that are very, very skilled and publish and do videos, David Marks, Chris Christopher Schwartz, Tommy Mack, they tended to gravitate toward the carbide tools, and I think because turning is not their primary skill set. It's an add-on to do spindles and table legs, and not in David Mark's case, I think, where he's getting into some more artwork. But they just want to get it done, and I can relate to that because I view myself as I can't handle design software. I've tried SketchUp and I've struggled with it and just gave up. I could wrestle it to the ground if I really wanted to, but for what I do and my needs, I find it just easier to pick up a piece of paper and a pencil and a ruler and draw a rough sketch. So that's kind of the flip side. So I guess we can see there's definitely pros and cons of carbide tools, just as there is with conventional tools, and it just varies. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming out and helping me with the video and bringing out your carbide tools.
Thanks for having me out. I enjoyed visiting your shop and explaining how I got started in wood turning.
Y'all stay safe. Come on back here.